doing?
Just throwing your empty bottle in the garbage.
Don't you know plastics go in the blue container?
Mayor Frank Jackson and the City of Cleveland are committed to keeping your neighborhood clean and green through the use of the city-issued trash and recycling carts. It's safe, convenient, and mandatory. For more information, contact the Cleveland Division of Waste Collection at 216-664-3717.
How did you get to be so smart?
I had a good teacher.
People always say what a great place Cleveland is. That puts Cleveland in a competitive advantage. We as a community, as a region, are going to prosper.
Welcome to another episode of Frank Talk. I'm your host, Leah Haslage. This is the only place you can get first-hand information from our great mayor of the city of Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson. Mayor, welcome.
Well, thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Doing good.
Well, summer is finally on its way. The weather's getting warmer. Now more people are going to be out and about, more events and festivals in town. Does our safety department do anything differently since it's getting warmer and more people are out?
Well, they always gear up for certain times of the year. As you said, in the summertime, they have festivals. They have the Indians games. Football season be coming up soon. They have concerts, they have all these things. And then in the neighborhoods, they have their neighborhood events. So there's always a lot of activity during the summer that they gear up for. That and the day is longer, stays light longer, and there's a lot of activity on the street, particularly in the neighborhood. So there's always a redeployment and of resource and personnel based on what the demands are. And they've done this every year, so they know what to do and what to expect. Now this year we'll have the International Gay Games, which will be extra activity for about 10 days to 14 days. So it'll be all concentrated mainly downtown, but it'll be other places where they'll have sporting venues. So it'll be quite a busy year.
Have they set up certain protocols already for the gay games to kind of get prepped?
There are things, they meet constantly. The closer it gets to the games, they meet weekly in order to coordinate things. But they've been meeting at least monthly already. Not with just safety, public service, and all the other departments that has to be involved in order to make it a successful games. And they've worked with Positively Cleveland, the hotel people. So it's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that, you see what you see, but it doesn't really reflect all the work that goes on behind the scenes to produce that product or that event or to provide that environment.
And we know it's going to be very successful. Speaking of successful, we're on to the next level for the Republican National Convention Committee. They were recently in town, but what in particular were they looking at when they were here?
Well, they were looking, we had submitted the application and we went to DC to talk about what was in our application. And so they came here, a small group came here to see if what we put in our application we could do. Was the commitment in terms of dollars there from the public and the private sector? Did we have the hotel rooms that we talked about? They were very interested in the venue where the convention would be held, which is the Q. So they spent a lot of time there. They wanted to know about safety and transportation, all these things, the amenities, all these things. So it was a technical visit. They were here for one day, and it's a technical visit. Then there's another visit if we make it out of this phase where we get into a shorter list. The entire Republican National Committee will come and visit the cities that they've chosen on the short list. And that's when we will, it won't be the technical side because the technical people would already have reviewed that and made some decisions, but it will be the entire committee then coming and looking at the venue, looking at the hotels, looking at all this kind of stuff. And it will be more of it's more whining and dining there.
Do you feel that since we've been going through this now, especially the technical round, we're better prepared for if other organizations or committees like the Democratic National, for other people that consider us, do you think we're better prepared now for that?
Well, we've been through this before. In 2006, when we applied for the Republican National Convention, we came in second there. And we're a much different city now than we were then in many good ways. So that's why we think we're going to have a pretty good shot at this. We're going to apply for the Democratic National Convention, and then we'll go through their process. We've done these kind of things, whether it was senior games, the gay games this year, whether it's the rock and roll induction ceremonies, the children's game, whatever it is, movies, production. So we've done these kinds of things. And we, so the people involved is what they do, yeah. and they have a system in place, and they do it quite well.
Well, something really exciting that just took place was the Dazzle in the District and the lighting of the GE Chandelier. How does it feel that we made the Guinness Book of World Records because of this dazzling, beautiful piece?
Well, I just found that out that the night when they lit chandelier. I mean, it's nice. I imagine somebody will come up and break the record sooner or later. But that's another example of how public safety handled large crowds. They had Indians game that night. They had a concert at the Q, I think it was Cher. They had this, which had thousands of people at it, the chandelier lighting. So there's probably 50,000 or more people downtown, coming in and out of downtown. So things move. It's just, now you wouldn't know the difference because it moves slowly, and I mean, it moved good, it moved well. And usually when those things go flawlessly and smoothly, people don't think about it. They only think about it when when something happens, there's a problem. So the lighting of the chandelier was nice. There was a lot of people down there. They had a great time. I think it made some national kind of media there and press. So it was a good event.
And it brought a lot of people to the theater district that maybe hasn't been there in a while, and there's so much development going on. How crucial is that development in the theater district for our city right now? Well,
the theater district is part of the city as a whole, but downtown, and particularly that portion of downtown. They tell me that it's the largest theater district outside of New York City. So there's a lot of theaters there with a lot of activity. Now, it's not as large geographically, so it's very dense, it's very concentrated, but there's a lot of activity that occurs there on any given night. You may have 3 or 4 theaters going, you have different events. Now, what this does, this is iconic. And so when people visit and they go to what is already an established venue, they will remember this chandelier. So it becomes a signature, and it helps define the space, and it helps to, when people talk about it, they'll not only talk about the shows or events they went to, but they'll talk about this chandelier and the arches.
Probably bringing a lot more tourists too to see it.
True. True. Would you do that?
I would.
Right.
But
So somebody it was just like going to the to see anything new. People do like to see it, and when they do that, there's that activity that would not have been there but for. It reminds me Marine Week, when we had the Marines in town, and we closed off Public Square, and they set up their equipment there. And I talked to people who had not been in Cleveland for over 15 years, into downtown Cleveland, and was amazed at what they saw and experienced. And it was completely different than what they perceived it to be, because the only thing they knew about is what they heard on the radio, saw on TV, or read in the print, which is not, as you know, always accurate. And so it's that kind of thing where the Chandelier, the Arches, will bring people there who, but for that, would not have any reason to go there. And once they do, they'll see it for what it is and have a different impression.
Well, recently, the Port of Cleveland, the first vessels came through the Cleveland Europe Express via the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is a huge deal, but our viewers may not realize how huge. Can you talk about the economic impact that's going to bring our city? Well,
I've often talked about transportation is the lifeline of commerce. If you would look at commerce as blood, and commerce is just a flow of business, goods and materials, it's just a movement of goods and material and things like that. And it's by road, it's by rail, it's by air, and it's by water. And so wherever you see the flow of commerce, just like the flow of blood, and those modes of transportation like the arteries and the veins that the blood flows through, whenever you see that, you have healthy tissue. But if there's the cutting off of that flow of blood or that flow of commerce, then that portion of the body doesn't really get nourished, and in some cases it dies. So what the flow of commerce over the waterway from Europe, direct shipping, it doesn't stop in on the East Coast where they unload and then they put it on truck or train, and then they ship it by truck or train to the Midwest. This is a direct from Holland, from the Netherlands, down the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes into Cleveland. And it's goods and materials on ships that are in these containers, large containers. Then they put it onto trains and trucks to then transport to its destination. Now, what does all that do? It sets up the flow of commerce, which is the lifeblood, is part of the economics of it all. It's more environmentally friendly because you have less of a carbon footprint on water. Whereas if you were putting it on rail or on a truck, you have a carbon footprint because you're burning gas, you're burning diesel, you're burning coal, whatever it is. And then it gets to the market quicker because you don't have to wait for the ships to unload on the East Coast, then load up, and then drive or put on a train all that distance. So it gets it to the market quicker, it's less expensive, and it's more environmentally friendly, and it really connects Cleveland with a global economy. Now the key is after the ship comes in and they unload whatever that cargo is and ship it to its destination, the key is filling the ship up and sending it back to Europe. And we have, I think the first cargo that went back were buses. A local company made, I guess, school buses. And so they're going to Europe. They have interest from people all over the Midwest, and they said they even have some interest from people on the West Coast because it's less expensive for them if they get it to Cleveland and then the same process of direct transportation to Europe. So it's loading up that cargo ship, those containers, and sending the goods and material back. And then that ship getting loaded there and then coming back here. So that's the importance of it. Is a part of our economy, is part of the flow of our economy through the commerce, the flow of goods and material through commerce. And it's really significant.
A huge impact for Cleveland. Very exciting.
And Cleveland and the entire region, because see, Cleveland will become the focal point where you do this this trade, where you load and unload. So things will come to Cleveland to be loaded, things will come to Cleveland to be unloaded and distributed. So it puts Cleveland as a focal point.
Well, we have a couple of questions from viewers.
Right.
Our first question is from Ms. Betty Gordon. She likes to know, what does the announcement of the Metro Parks acquiring Whiskey Island, the Flats, and Heritage Park 1 mean for the residents of Cleveland?
Well, it's not just Cleveland, it's the whole Metro Park chain, which, as you know, is most of which is not in Cleveland. It's part of the whole Emerald Necklace thing, the whole Metro Park system. So it really provides that connection. I think Edgewater and many are Euclid Beach now is part of that now, Whiskey Island, and it really allows for one entity to control and develop and maintain all of this lakefront park stuff. So whether it's bike trails or hiking or just park settings, all that kind of stuff, and Metro Park does a great job. They do a great job. We were able to get our city's parks, lakefront parks, back from the State Department of Natural Resources, and we then leased the operations and the maintenance to Metro Parks. So now they have ours, they have the county's, Whiskey Island, all these others is really connected.
That'd be great, especially for bikers, because then they can bike the whole Emerald Necklace
well,
at one point.
Well, you could probably do it now. It's just ownership. I mean, it's just a control, who controls the property, who maintains it. But Metro, if you have one entity, then they can coordinate that capital investment that makes upgrade things, to keep things clean, to those kinds of things, and then they can then plan if they want to extend and connect bike trails or whatever. They can plan it because they'll have control over the entire stretch, as opposed to having to deal with someone else.
Oh, true. Thank you again, Betty. Our next question is Denise Patterson, and she asks, I know Mayor Jackson is big on city services, and I saw on TV20's blog the city is seeking proposals for a sustainable waste management solution.
Right.
Is that service no longer available from the city of Cleveland?
No, we do it. We're looking for proposals. Say, for instance, we are doing recyclables. We're recycling. We will have a contractor who will be responsible for getting those recyclables, and marketing it and doing all those things with it. They then pay us a rate for that. So we're still in the recycling business, but we currently have a vendor who does that, takes the recyclables and process that separate from the garbage. So every now and then we'll go back out to bid, so to see if we can get a better price. Maybe we can, from somebody else, we can get, they'll pay us more for our recyclables.
Okay.
So it does several things. It helps reduce the amount of stuff that goes into landfill. It gives us some cash without us having to go through the process of sorting, and it it just gives us the ability to focus on the trash. Now, what we're looking for is also a contract or an arrangement with someone who would be what we call a MRF, and that would take the garbage and then actually separate out the garbage and get, if there are recyclables in there that was commingled there, or if there are things that have a heavy toxic or environmental, pull that out, and then use the remaining of the garbage to make pellets that could be used as fuel instead of coal. And then that too will reduce the amount of waste we would put in the landfill, because now we're using this garbage now to make a product that can be used as fuel rather than coal. And then we'll have the recyclables that are outside of the waste stream. So it is more environmentally friendly, and it gives us the opportunity then to sell that product to someone if in fact we have there's a market for it.
Is it harder to find a company that's able to do the separation with like the garbage to do all that?
People do it. People do it. I mean, it's not anything new. Is something that is caught on and is something more in line with what cities and companies are going, not just public sector, private sector. This is a year in our sustainability effort, our 10-year sustainability plan. This is a year of zero waste. So the key is, how do you get to the point where you have zero waste, which means you have recycled your waste in some kind of way. Companies like it because there's a tremendous cost to disposing of waste. And if you're a manufacturer, or if you're just, you might be a company that's an office environment, you still have waste. Every day there's waste produced. So the question is, how do you reduce your costs in disposing of that waste, and how do you do it in a way that's environmentally friendly? So there's a connection now between being environmentally friendly and being profitable in the private sector. Zero waste is part of that. So that's what we're talking about. So when we're looking for these companies that would do certain things, it is so that it fits into our mode and into our policy to be environmentally sound, and at the same time save money by not having to pay as much for tipping fees to dump, not having to dump as much, and actually making a little money from the recyclables and the pellets that we can make from garbage. So it's all part of an overall plan. And this website that the thing that she referenced on the website is one portion of that, something we already have been doing. So yeah, we're staying in the business.
Perfect. Well, thank you again to our viewers for their questions. And I have one more for you. And that is, recently the sin tax has passed. Right. What kind of impact is that going to now have for our city?
Well, the sin tax is good for us because we own these facilities. We own the Browns Stadium straight out, and the Browns lease from us. And that means that we're landlords, and we have under the lease obligations to make capital repairs. And if we're unable to do that, and we're not maintaining the facilities, then you have several things happen. One of which, that little thing that you could have fixed turns into the big thing later because you deferred that maintenance, and then it's a huge cost. Then secondly, in order to have a good fan experience in that facility, you have to have a facility that is up to grade. So it has to be something that people want to go to, not the bathrooms don't work, the water doesn't work, you know, that kind of stuff. You have to maintain these facilities, and it can't be that there's garbage all over the place, or if there's carpeting that is torn up and dirty, those kinds of things. And the seats have to be functional. The lighting has to be good. So all those kinds. So what happens here is that we are the landlord. We have obligations. The Browns have obligations. And so this helps us meet our end of the obligation. With the Jacobs Field, not Jacobs, Progressive Field and the Q, the Indians and the Cavs, the Gateway Corporation is the landlord there. So they have the same obligation that we have because they own the facility. The problem is they don't have any money. So if in fact there's a major capital need that is the obligation not of the Indians or the Cavaliers, but is the obligation of Gateway, then that obligation that comes out of Progressive Fields, the Indians, falls back on the city. And the obligation coming out of the Q, the Cavs, falls on the county. So what this does, it allows us to create a capital reserve that we can invest in maintaining these facilities and maintaining them in a way that keeps them competitive for the sports teams and comfortable for the fans, and relieves potential financial obligations that the city and the county would have to pay if we didn't have this. So it's a good thing for the city of Cleveland.
Yeah,
and the county. And the county. And if you drink wine, or beer, or you smoke cigarettes, you're going to pay a few pennies. You're going to pay a few pennies. So if you go into any of those games, you're drinking beer, you're part of what you're paying, probably, I don't know, 3-4 cents or 2-3-4 cents on that beer will be to go to this sin tax. If you smoke cigarettes, you're going to pay 2, 3, or 4 cents, I don't know what, towards this sin tax when you buy a pack of cigarettes. If you go to a restaurant and you have a glass of wine, you're going to pay 2, 3, or 4 cents, whatever it is, towards this sin tax. And that means that if you're not drinking, if you don't drink or you don't smoke, you'll never pay this tax. Never pay this tax. If you do, and you do that in Cuyahoga County, then part of the cost of doing that will be this tax that will go to help maintain these facilities.
Well, it's nice to know that all these developments are happening in Cleveland, and we're doing so well economically, obviously. And I love your analogy, by the way, from the port with the arm in commerce. That was a great analogy for it.
Well, you know, one of the things that like gangrene is when blood stops going to a certain part of your body. People who are diabetic usually have to be careful of that, because when your capillaries are little small blood veins, if they're not functioning, then the blood can't get to the tip of your fingers or to your toes or to your hands or your feet. And as a result of that, if you get an injury, because the blood cannot get there to help heal that injury, many times gangrene is set in. And that's how people wind up with amputation. So you have to have the flow of blood throughout your body in order for you to be healthy. You have to have the flow of commerce throughout the body of the city and the region in order for us to have economic health. And that's what this port does. That's what by water. That's what the airport does by air. That's what the railroad does. And that's what our highways do.
Well, I always learn so much from you, and I'm sure our viewers do as well. And thank you again for taking time out of your busy day, as always.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
And thank you to our viewers that submitted questions again. And thank you for watching TV20's Frank Talk, the only place you can get firsthand information from our great mayor of the city of Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson. Thanks for watching.